Number 1. Pamela Smart. Pamela Smart was just 22 years old when her name became synonymous with one of the most sensational teacher-student scandals in American history. Fresh out of college, she worked as a media coordinator at Winnacunnet High School in Hampton, New Hampshire. Not a classroom teacher, but close enough to wield influence over students. She was bright, enthusiastic, and well-spoken. Her job involved overseeing student broadcasting and media programs, but behind her professional image was a personal life unraveling, and soon a relationship that would end in murder. At the time, Pamela was married to Greg Smart, her high school sweetheart. Their marriage was rocky. Barely a year old, Greg was reportedly cheating, and Pamela, feeling emotionally abandoned, began seeking attention elsewhere. That attention came from one of her students, a 15-year-old named Billy Flynn. Flynn was quiet, impressionable, and immediately infatuated. The two began an affair, one that Pamela not only allowed, but allegedly cultivated. Testimony and later investigations revealed that she seduced him, encouraged his affection, and fed him fantasies of a life together, a life that in her eyes required Greg to be out of the picture. The fantasy became a plan. May 1st, 1990. Greg Smart walked into his home after work. Inside, two of Billy Flynn's teenage friends were waiting. One of them was armed. They forced Greg to his knees and shot him in the head. Pamela Smart was at a school meeting. At the time, a move prosecutors would later argue was part of her alibi. But within weeks, the plan began to unravel. One of the teenage accomplices confessed. Flynn was arrested. Under pressure, he admitted everything, including Pamela's role in manipulating and pressuring him to commit the murder. The trial captivated the nation. Flynn testified that Pamela had promised they could be together if Greg was gone, and that she insisted the only way to make that happen was to kill him. Pamela maintained her innocence, claiming Billy acted alone out of jealousy. But the most damning piece of evidence came in the form of secretly recorded conversations between Pamela and a student informant. While she never explicitly confessed, her evasive responses, nervous laughter, and attempts to discuss cover-up strategies left a powerful impression on the jury. In March 1991, Pamela Smart was found guilty of being an accomplice to first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and witness tampering. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. She was sent to Bedford Hills Correctional Facility in New York, where she remains to this day. The media frenzy surrounding the case was unprecedented. Courtroom cameras broadcast the trial nationwide. Tabloids fed off the story: the young attractive teacher, the teenage lover, the murder plot. The case inspired several books, news specials, and even a Hollywood film, To Die For, starring Nicole Kidman. Over the years, Pamela has given multiple interviews, maintaining that she never ordered the murder, but her appeals have all been denied. Meanwhile, Billy Flynn served 25 years and was released in 2015. What makes the Pamela Smart case unforgettable is not just the murder itself, it's the manipulation, the betrayal of a child's mind, and the cold calculation beneath a smiling face. She was not a stranger, she was a mentor, an adult, a figure of trust. This case redefined how the public viewed inappropriate teacher-student relationships, not just as ethical violations, but as crimes with devastating, irreversible consequences. Number 2. Carla Hughes. Carla Hughes was 25 years old, a middle school language arts teacher in Jackson, Mississippi. She was pursuing her graduate degree at Jackson State University. Friends described her as intelligent, ambitious, and poised for success. But beneath her polished exterior was a secret. She was entangled in a love triangle that would end in the brutal murder of a pregnant woman, a crime that shocked her community and left a lasting mark on Mississippi's legal history. Carla had been secretly dating a fellow teacher, Keon Pittman. The problem was, Keon was already engaged to another woman, 27-year-old Avis Banks. Avis was 5 months pregnant. She had a stable job, a home, and a future. She was building with Keon. CARLA knew all of this. She also knew about the baby. And in the weeks leading up to the murder, she grew increasingly erratic. Prosecutors would later argue that her behavior revealed a growing desperation and a chilling plan to eliminate her rival. On November 29, 2006, Avis Banks arrived home from work. As she stepped into her garage, someone was waiting. Avis was ambushed and shot 4 times, once in the back, once in the head, and twice more in the torso. Then she was stabbed repeatedly in the face and neck. A final act of personal rage. Her unborn child, a boy, died with her. At first, Keon Pittman was the obvious suspect. He was cheating. He had access to the home, but during questioning, he provided an alibi and pointed the investigators toward CARLA HUGHES. He told police that CARLA had been acting strangely, that she had visited him unannounced the night of the murder, and that she had appeared panicked and disheveled. Most damning of all, CARLA was missing 2 things: a specific set of clothes and a gun she had borrowed from her cousin. The weapon was the same caliber as the one used in the murder. Detectives discovered that CARLA had taken the gun without her cousin's knowledge. They also learned she had asked someone to dispose of a pair of blood-stained shoes and a black jumpsuit. Surveillance footage placed her vehicle in the area. Although there was no DNA linking her to the scene, the circumstantial evidence was building. Her trial began in 2009. CARLA's defense team argued there was no forensic evidence, no fingerprints, no blood, no direct connection to the murder weapon. But prosecutors countered with motive, opportunity, and a chilling pattern of concealment. They painted CARLA as a woman who had grown obsessed with Keon Pittman and viewed Avis Banks as an obstacle to be removed. During the trial, CARLA remained quiet, showing little emotion. The jury, however, saw enough. After deliberating, they found her guilty on 2 counts of capital murder, one for Avis and one for the unborn child. She was sentenced to 2 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. The judge, in his remarks, called the crime savage, especially the stabbing. After the shooting, an act that suggested deep personal anger and a complete disregard for life. Today, CARLA HUGHES remains incarcerated at the Central Mississippi Correctional Facility. She continues to maintain her innocence, but all appeals have failed. Her case is now studied in law and criminology programs for its complex intersection of motive, emotional obsession, and the calculated nature of the crime. What makes this case so disturbing is not only the brutality of the attack, but the context. This wasn't a break-in or a random act of violence. It was a planned execution carried out by an educated woman in a respected profession targeting a pregnant mother inside her own home. It's a reminder that obsession can masquerade as love, and that sometimes danger comes not from strangers, but from someone smiling across a school hallway. Number 3, Jacqueline. Jacqueline Ma was by most public accounts everything a school district could hope for. A 6th-grade teacher at Lincoln Acres Elementary School in National City, California, she had been named Teacher of the Year by her district and was widely praised for her dedication to students and her charismatic presence in the classroom. But in March 2023, her reputation collapsed almost overnight. What had been seen as commitment was re-examined as something far more troubling and deeply inappropriate. The woman once celebrated for shaping young minds was now accused of targeting them. The case began when the family of a 13-year-old boy contacted law enforcement. They were concerned about messages and interactions between their son and a teacher. Messages that suggested a relationship far beyond what any adult should have with a student. The student had once been in Ma's class. As police opened a formal investigation, they seized digital devices and began combing through communications. What they found painted a disturbing picture. According to prosecutors, Jacqueline Ma had sent messages that were romantic in tone, sometimes obsessive. She expressed jealousy over the boy's interactions with other students. She referred to him in possessive terms. The conversations revealed not just poor judgment, but calculated emotional manipulation. On March 7, 2023, Ma was arrested at her school. She was charged with multiple felony counts related to child endangerment and abuse of authority. Her bail was initially set at $100,000, a figure that would not hold for long. Just 2 days later, on March 9th, she was rearrested. Additional evidence had surfaced along with a new allegation involving a second minor. Investigators now believe that Ma had been engaging in a pattern, not an isolated lapse, but a sustained abuse of trust. Her bail was raised to $1.9 million. Prosecutors outlined a digital trail that included messages sent through school email, personal apps, and even learning platforms. It showed attempts to conceal communication using school-issued tablets and other devices to avoid detection. The evidence, they argued, pointed to a premeditated effort to exploit her access to students. Initially, Jacqueline Ma pleaded not guilty. She denied all wrongdoing, asserting that the messages had been misunderstood or taken out of context. But as the investigation expanded and more digital evidence came to light, her legal strategy changed. In early 2024, Ma accepted a plea deal. She pleaded guilty to several felony counts, including unlawful communication with a minor child, sexual abuse, and abuse of authority. As part of the agreement, she received a sentence of 30 years to life in prison. She will not be eligible for parole for at least 3 decades. She is currently serving her sentence in a California state correctional facility. The case sparked national conversation, particularly in the education sector. School districts across the country reviewed policies around digital communication, teacher training, and student reporting systems. Experts warned that Ma's case highlighted systemic gaps where personal boundaries were not just crossed, but ignored. The betrayal of trust in this case is what made it so deeply unsettling. Jacqueline Ma was not simply a teacher, she was held up as a model educator. Her accolades were not just paper certificates. They represented community pride and student admiration. And yet underneath that praise was something hidden, something manipulative, something dangerous. In professional development circles, her name is now used as a cautionary reference, not because she was uniquely evil, but because she appeared so normal, so ideal, so unthreatening. What makes this case matter is not only what she did, but who no one believed she could be. Number 4, CAROLYN WARMUS. In the late 1980s, CAROLYN WARMUS was a young, attractive school teacher working in Westchester County, New York. A graduate of Columbia University's Teachers College. She taught at Edgemont Elementary School and was known for her sophistication and poise. To those around her, she seemed driven and intelligent, a woman from a privileged background who was committed to her career in education. But beneath that calm, collected exterior was a different story. One fueled by obsession, secrecy, and ultimately murder. CAROLYN had entered into an affair with Paul Solomon, a fellow educator at the school where she taught. Solomon was married to Betty Jean Solomon and had a daughter with her. While Paul claimed his marriage was troubled, he was not prepared to leave his wife, but CAROLYN WARMUS wanted more than an affair. According to investigators, she wanted Paul and only Paul. And when it became clear that his family stood in the way of that future, she decided to remove the obstacle. On January 15, 1989, Betty Jean Solomon was found murdered in the family's home in Greenburgh, New York. She had been shot 9 times, a level of violence that suggested personal rage. Paul discovered her whole body and became the initial suspect. But attention soon shifted to WARMUS. She had no alibi for the hours during which the murder occurred. Phone records showed she had made multiple calls to Paul, including both before and after the crime. But it was the physical evidence that began to close in on her. Investigators learned that WARMUS had allegedly obtained a .25 caliber handgun through an acquaintance, the same type of weapon used in the killing. Even more damning. A sales receipt placed her at a local store buying a pair of gloves on the day of the murder. Gloves that prosecutors believed were used to avoid leaving fingerprints at the scene. WARMUS denied any involvement, maintaining that she had nothing to do with Betty Jean's death, but prosecutors argued that she had the motive, means, and opportunity, and that she believed killing Paul's wife would finally cement their relationship. In 1990, WARMUS was arrested and charged with second-degree murder and criminal possession of a weapon. Her first trial ended in a hung jury, but in a second trial later that year, the prosecution delivered a more tightly focused case emphasizing the timeline: the gun, the gloves, and her obsessive behavior. This time, the jury convicted her on both counts. In 1992, CAROLYN WARMUS was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison. She served her time at Bedford Hills Correctional Facility, the same prison where Pamela Smart would later be incarcerated. During her time behind bars, WARMUS granted interviews, participated in media documentaries, and consistently claimed she had been framed. She argued that Paul Solomon should have been more closely investigated and that critical evidence had been overlooked. Despite her claims of innocence, her legal appeals were denied. After serving 27 years, CAROLYN WARMUS was granted parole in June 2019. Her release sparked renewed media attention, with many still debating her guilt and the fairness of her trial. Some believed she had been convicted more on character and appearance than on irrefutable forensic evidence. The media dubbed her the Fatal Attraction Killer, a reference to the 1987 film about an affair that turns violent. The nickname stuck, and so did the public fascination with her case. What makes the CAROLYN WARMUS story endure is its complexity. It's not just about a murder. It's about perception, manipulation, and the hidden dynamics of intimate relationships. It's about a person who used charm and intelligence to conceal darker intentions. And perhaps most unsettling of all, it's about how quickly a trusted teacher could become a suspect in one of the most sensational crimes of the decade. Number 5. Nancy SEAMAN. Nancy SEAMAN was a 52-year-old elementary school teacher in Farmington Hills, Michigan. Known for her dedication to her students at Longacre Elementary and for winning a Teacher of the Year award, she was seen as a patient, nurturing educator, a fixture in her community, respected both in the classroom and at home. But on May 10, 2004, her carefully curated image collapsed when police found her husband, Robert SEAMAN, bludgeoned and stabbed to death in the garage of their suburban home. The question wasn't whether Nancy killed him. She admitted that she had. The question was why Nancy SEAMAN told investigators that she had endured years of psychological and physical abuse at the hands of her husband. She claimed the killing was an act of self-defense, the result of a final explosive confrontation that left her fearing for her life. But prosecutors saw something different. They argued that Nancy had meticulously planned her husband's murder. Evidence showed she had purchased a hatchet and a shovel just days before the incident. Receipts and surveillance footage confirmed the timing of the purchases. That timeline would prove critical. The crime scene also raised suspicions. Robert SEAMAN had been struck over 24 times with the hatchet. He had also been stabbed repeatedly. The blood trail extended into other parts of the house, indicating that Nancy had moved his body. She had cleaned portions of the garage floor, laundered bloody clothes, and discarded some of the tools used in the killing. Nancy didn't deny any of it, but her attorneys presented an alternative narrative: battered woman syndrome. They called expert witnesses to explain how years of abuse could warp a victim's perception, creating a sense of entrapment and desperation. They pointed to hospital records, diary entries, and statements from friends and colleagues who said Nancy had confided in them about her fear of Robert. Still, the prosecution argued that the level of planning, the purchased weapons, the cleanup effort, the inconsistent statements pointed not to panic, but premeditation. They painted Nancy as a woman who wanted to escape a miserable marriage and saw murder as her only exit. In 2005, Nancy SEAMAN was convicted of first-degree premeditated murder. Under Michigan law, that meant an automatic sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole. But the legal battle didn't end there. In 2010, a federal judge overturned her conviction, ruling that her original trial counsel had been ineffective, particularly in failing to fully develop and present the battered woman defense. For a moment, it looked like she might receive a new trial. But that ruling was appealed and eventually reversed by the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals. Her original conviction was reinstated. Over the years, SEAMAN has continued to file appeals and petitions, arguing that the courts failed to properly consider the context of her marriage and the trauma she endured. Her supporters say her case is a clear example of how the legal system often misunderstands domestic abuse. Her critics say it's a calculated misuse of a valid defense, an attempt to justify murder. Today, Nancy SEAMAN remains incarcerated at the Women's Huron Valley Correctional Facility, the only women's prison in Michigan. Her case is studied in law schools and domestic violence programs across the country. It raises difficult questions about justice intent and the blurry line between survival and revenge. Was Nancy SEAMAN a desperate woman trapped in an abusive marriage acting in fear? Or was she a woman who saw an opportunity to escape and took it with ruthless precision? Either way, one truth remains: a man is dead, a family is broken, and a once respected teacher now lives out her days behind prison walls. Number 6. KAITLIN Armstrong. KAITLIN Armstrong was not a public figure, but within Austin, Texas's vibrant fitness scene she was well known. A former yoga instructor and real estate agent, Armstrong appeared to lead a healthy, balanced life. She shared a home with her boyfriend, Colin Strickland, a professional cyclist. Their relationship on the surface seemed secure, but in May 2022, a fatal crime would shatter that image and launch a manhunt that spanned multiple countries. The victim was Anna Moriah Mo Wilson, a 25-year-old rising star in the world of competitive gravel cycling. Wilson had traveled to Austin to compete in a major race. She was staying at a friend's house when she was found shot to death in the bathroom on May 11th, just hours after spending time with Colin Strickland. Strickland and Wilson had briefly dated during a break in his relationship with Armstrong. According to investigators, Armstrong never got over it. Text messages and phone records showed that Armstrong had access to Strickland's phone and was aware of his communications with Wilson. Surveillance footage from the neighborhood captured Wilson arriving at the house then, Armstrong's black Jeep circling the area just before the murder. Police also found that Armstrong's firearm matched ballistic evidence recovered at the scene. Just days after being interviewed by police, Armstrong disappeared. Authorities later discovered she had used her sister's passport to flee the country. She ended up in Costa Rica, where she altered her appearance, changed her name, and enrolled in a surf and yoga retreat under a false identity. The U.S. Marshals launched an intensive search after 43 days on the run. Armstrong was apprehended at a hostel in Santa Teresa Beach, Costa Rica. She was extradited back to Texas in July 2022. In court, the prosecution laid out a clear motive: jealousy. Armstrong had allegedly viewed Wilson as a threat to her relationship and acted with calculated intent. They presented forensic evidence, surveillance videos, cell tower data, and testimony from those close to the case. The defense attempted to cast doubt on the strength of the evidence, pointing out gaps in the timeline and inconsistencies in witness statements. But the jury found the totality of the evidence overwhelming. In November 2023, KAITLIN Armstrong was found guilty of first-degree murder. She was sentenced to 90 years in prison with the possibility of parole after several decades. During sentencing, the judge emphasized the deliberate and premeditated nature of the crime. The case drew national and international attention not just for the violent act itself, but for what it revealed about hidden emotions, control, and the extremes some will go to when consumed by jealousy. It also became a cautionary tale about evasion and identity fraud. Beyond the courtroom, the story deeply impacted the world of cycling. Mariah Wilson had been considered one of the sport's most promising young athletes. Tributes from fellow racers poured in, highlighting her determination, generosity, and potential. Her death was seen as a devastating loss for the entire community. For law enforcement, the case highlighted the growing complexity of international fugitive searches in the digital age. Armstrong's ability to flee, alter her appearance, and almost disappear underscored both the vulnerability of systems and the importance of swift interagency cooperation. Today, KAITLIN Armstrong is incarcerated in a Texas state prison. She maintains her innocence in media statements, but her conviction stands. The story of KAITLIN Armstrong and Mariah Wilson is ultimately a story of trust, broken ambition, cut short, and emotion left unchecked. It serves as a reminder that beneath calm exteriors can lie deeply dangerous impulses, ones that, when acted upon, destroy lives. Number 7. Mary Kay. LETOURNEAU. Mary Kay. LETOURNEAU, a name that captured the attention of an entire nation and left behind one of the most controversial stories in modern American education and criminal history. Born in 1962 in Tustin, California, Mary was raised in a strict Catholic household. She was the third of 7 children in a politically active family. Her father, John G. Schmitz, was a prominent figure, a state senator, a congressman, and even a third-party presidential candidate. Despite the family's public image, life behind closed doors was not without hardship. At just 11, Mary experienced the tragic death of her younger brother, which she later said deeply affected her relationship with her mother. Mary attended Arizona State University, where she met Steve LETOURNEAU. After an unexpected pregnancy, both were urged by their families to marry. Though lacking mutual affection, they followed through. They would go on to have 4 children, but their relationship was marked by difficulties, including financial struggles and mutual infidelity. Mary eventually pursued a teaching degree and began her career at an elementary school in Burien, Washington in 1989. In 1991, she met Willy Fualau, then a second-grade student in her class. She encouraged his artistic interests, and they kept in contact even when she was no longer his teacher. Fast forward to 1995. Mary, now 34, and Willy, only 12, were again in the same classroom. This time under very different circumstances. In June 1996, their relationship crossed a serious line. Mary became pregnant with Willy's child that September. The situation came to light in early 1997 when her husband discovered love letters between the two. Mary was arrested in March of that year and later pled guilty to 2 counts of second-degree child rape. As part of a plea deal, she was sentenced to 6 months in county jail, with 3 suspended, and was ordered to stay away from Willy for life. But just weeks after her release, authorities found the two together again. She was arrested, and the original deal was revoked. This time she received the full 7.5-year sentence. While in prison, Mary gave birth to their second daughter. During her incarceration, she became the subject of widespread media attention and remained a divisive figure. Some viewed her as deeply troubled, others as someone who had committed an irreversible breach of trust. After her release in 2004, Mary was registered as a sex offender. Yet despite everything, Willy, then 21, requested the court lift the no-contact order. In 2005, the two were married in Washington state. Their union lasted 14 years and included raising their 2 daughters together. Over time, public sentiment evolved. Interviews revealed complex emotions on both sides. Mary once stated she hadn't understood the legal consequences of her actions. At the time, Willie for years claimed he wasn't a victim, but later admitted he now sees the relationship as unhealthy from the beginning. In 2019, they separated. Just 1 year later, Mary Kay LeTourneau passed away from colorectal cancer at the age of 58. In her final days, she was surrounded by family, including Willie. Her story continues to spark debates on consent power legality and emotional manipulation. Was it a forbidden love story, or was it a violation of trust, boundaries, and law? Mary Kay LeTourneau's life and choices remain a stark reminder that lines crossed especially between teacher and student carry consequences far beyond the classroom.